Welcome, everybody. This is the start of our club development conference this year. We're kicking it off with actually a pre-session, as you're all aware, because you made it here. We Our theme for this year is building capacity and alignment. So last year we introduced kind of the match official and coach game management streams. And this year we're trying to embed a bit more of the bigger picture, including high performance. So we asked Sandro to come and speak a little bit more to sort of the entire pathway and how club development fits into this broader pathway as well. So before we get going, I just want to acknowledge that our member clubs and all of you are situated across the province in Ontario on ancestral and unceded territories of the Inuit, Métis, and First Nation people. We honor, recognize, and respect all Indigenous peoples as the traditional stewards of the land on which we participate in the sport of rugby. And as visitors to these lands, we also acknowledge the Indigenous people's longstanding presence in this territory and acknowledge this recognition is key in moving towards reconciliation. So if any of you would like to acknowledge where you're joining us from, feel free to do so in the chat. And we can kind of take a moment for you to do that. We do have the chat available today, so if you have questions as we go, feel free to put them in there. I'll monitor that to help Sandro out. Otherwise, we'll have some time as well for questions at the end. With that, Sandro, I'll hand it over to you to get us started.
Thanks, Joss. Appreciate everyone taking the time on Thursday before the club conference. So from my standpoint, we're going to talk about a few things tonight. Obviously, it's an open discussion, but primarily we're going to look at Rugby Ontario provincial high performance programming and how we can connect club development to provincial and national pathways. A little bit about myself. Obviously, I probably know many of you on this call, but my journey in rugby in Ontario has been over the last 20, 30 years. Like many of you, club has been the foundation of where I've started, and as a player and as a coach, was very grateful to be a part of that pathway, and then eventually did some of my coaching at the university level, and then back to provincial rugby in Ontario, and then very fortunate enough to coach internationally with Canada over a few cycles. So a lot of this resonates for me when we're talking about club development and the provincial pathways and national coaches. And from my standpoint, we're going to talk about strategic alignment. Alignment's a big word, and we're going to look at how the alignment works from top down, from an NSO's perspective, Rugby Canada, and our alignment with them, and then our alignment with the interbranches and the clubs here in Ontario. So that'll be a key theme, and obviously we'll go through key areas when it comes to player development, coach development, and a little bit on the referee, but mostly focusing on game development also. And really looking at, alignment does start with the club programming, right? Provincial and national pathways ensures that players receive consistent and development opportunities and experience. And it's important that these participants are in those environments and they can continue to grow and strive. And alignment matters, especially when it comes to having a clear pathway and a journey for our players. Ultimately, a lot of our players join the pathway at a young age, as 15 or 16, playing at the clubs, but ultimately participating in interbranch and then hopefully getting an opportunity to represent Ontario at multiple age groups. And then from our standpoint, we really have to focus on where we find these athletes. And I think from that standpoint, it's a continuous process for us to try to look for these players. And it is, important for us. Many of the grassroots rugby players are found either at clubs in high school. And I think that we continue to push forward and start identifying those top talent players that will emerge and represent Ontario and other facets of our programming and ultimately for Canada. And I think that's something that we continue to focus. I think anytime that a player feels like there's a sense of belonging and they have an identity with rugby from a club level or to Ontario, the player retention is key, right? They see the purpose, they progress. And obviously, from that standpoint, we're creating opportunities for those individuals to develop. And through that, we're building out expectations and standards so that they can develop and grow. So what's the gains for a club when we're looking at being aligned with Rugby Ontario and HP? So obviously, from our standpoint, it's always being able to enhance the coaching quality, right? And from our standpoint, we try to integrate all our coaches from Rugby Ontario that are involved at all club levels, right? They're either working with clubs or inter branches, and ultimately, we're trying to deliver some of the curriculum that is top down from Rugby Canada, right? And I think that that's key for us. But obviously, this is a work on. It's not perfect, but ultimately our goal is to always integrate coaches in those areas of opportunities through our development academies. And from that standpoint, that's something that we'll continue to address in the new strategic plan. I think, as you said, the more players that are participating in provincial rugby, it just adds credibility to those clubs, right? We'll talk about this later, but there's players that are coming from clubs, and obviously, the performances that they're providing at the provincial levels is a reciprocal. It's back, it's a give and take. Those players, we're learning from those players what they bring from clubs, and then hopefully they bring back some of the stuff that they learn from a provincial programming. And as you said, like it's important for us to have an aligned support, right? From our standpoint, is making sure that all the provincial resources are available for all players, coaches, and referees. So what does a player gain from this alignment for HP and club development? Obviously, it's developing alignment programs, preventing athletes to work together with us and their clubs to obviously making sure that they're not overtrained, but they're always in an ultimate performance environment. That doesn't always happen. It's something that we are constantly looking at to improve, but ultimately that's the goal. And opportunities, right? We want clear connections. We want athletes to see and aspire to play for Canada. And if it's an athlete who's entering our academy structure and is playing interbranch and makes it to a U18 Canada identification camp, we know that we're doing the best to make sure that those athletes can see the progression and growth. And then, really, from my standpoint, something that is foundational for me is having a holistic development plan. You'll usually hear me talk about the body, the mind, and your craft, but ultimately, these are areas that we continue to focus on. I think from our standpoint, we do a phenomenal job on the technical and tactical, but we still continue to need to grow in the areas of physical and mental preparation, and especially social skill development. And then from our standpoint, obviously, we want to provide an environment that's inclusive for everyone. And obviously, we know that there's financial and geographical barriers in Ontario. But the reality is, by having regional development centers, by having the inner branches, we're trying to alleviate some of those costs and travel, ultimately to have a wider base of athlete pool and coaches, so that allows us to maintain a larger portfolio of athletes to be identified. So, what's the role of the club, right? For me, being a club member at a young age, the clubs did everything for me. Not only did they integrate me into their culture, obviously, they provided me enjoyment. They provided me an opportunity to grow and strive as a young man. But it's a foundational builder. If you're looking at a shared contribution of an athlete development, I would say clubs have 80% of that. If you're looking at a percentage of the pie, 80% of the time that they're spending with those athletes in that development period under 18 is with the clubs. And I think from that standpoint, those are where we're developing those habits and skills and the love for that game, right? And ultimately, from that standpoint, it is where we're nurturing our young athletes and then providing a platform for them to obviously put their hand up and proceed through the pathway. And it is also, for me, it's always a great opportunity to see these athletes grow and give back, right? I put the clip here of Chloe. Chloe's a prime example of an athlete who started her journey as a young athlete at the Aurora Barbs and entered our environment in the HP environment at the age of 14 and 15 and put in a lot of hard work, strived, worked her way to a national program, had the opportunity to go represent Canada, win a gold, sorry, not a gold medal, a silver medal. And then obviously is one that is always coming back and giving back to her community. And that's the big thing for when we're looking at HP, these athletes will enter your environment, but obviously they'll exit at some point and come back and forth. And the ultimate goal for us from a high performance standpoint or a club is to continue to have these athletes integrate as either providing technical and tactical um, advice or giving back as coaches or referees. So ultimately, that's the big point of when we're looking at if you do have athletes that are a part of a provincial program or a national program, lean on them, get them to come out, especially in the winter months when they're home, to really contribute and give back to that community. That's the importance of that role modeling. That's essential in our sport. From that standpoint, I'll leave it open to any questions. Joss, if there is any, just let me know. All right. So I think from our standpoint, really just have a look at some of the key initiatives of the Ontario Blues programming. Ultimately, we have our aligned goals and values, but from our standpoint, our goal is to develop future and provincial national team athletes. It's obviously not only to prepare them physically and mentally, but to provide them holistic life skills, leadership, and a mindset so that they can become winners on and off the field. From my standpoint, I'm always looking at what's the next podium performance that we're getting our athletes ready for. And those podium performances could be right around the corner. It could be a club championship, right? Or could be a sevens tournament that just happened this fall. But ultimately, our goal is to provide those opportunities for these athletes to strive and grow in those environments. And I think from that standpoint, we focus on the growth mindset and personal accountability. And the key focus is we continue to allow those individuals to have an identity and have a sense of belonging to continue to grow and develop. And as you can see on the slide there, it is both from club branch teams to provincial and national teams. Then notice that there's a question up there.
Oh, that's
Joss? No?
me reminding them that they can put their questions in the chat.
Okay, perfect. Sorry. All right. So really a high level snapshot of here, right? When you can look at this high performance chart, we're looking at the alignment of the stages that Rugby Canada has provided. So we look at the three stages that are relevant to HP. We have stage 3, stage 4, and stage 5. Over the last 3-4 years, we've integrated an approach from competition to selection rather than having tryouts for specific age growth programming. We really started focusing on integrating the interbranch. So, and then they've done a phenomenal job. Credit to the TRU, Niagara, the NRU, the Southwest, and Eastern Ontario, really taking ownership of not only the development piece, but creating a competition structure so that these athletes can play in this great environment. And as you can see, that stage 3, that has become transparent as we moved it into obviously at the U19 level also. So anytime an athlete wants to try out or be a part of our provincial U19 programming, they will participate in an interbranch 3 to 4 week competition. And we've seen some great success from the U19 programs over the last couple of years. The men and women have been both in the gold medal matches twice, and we've had some phenomenal results. And then from the women's perspective and the men's and the senior, we won't go too much into that, but the interbranch will be introduced in the men's. And obviously, we've had some great success with the Quebec and Ontario series with the women, which will be launched next week. And we were very fortunate enough to have Kevin Way discuss that last week, last Friday night on a call with us. Very high level, right? This is a lot of moving pieces in this chart, but really it just has a look at, where the ages are and where the importance of HP integrates with our provincial programming. And you can see that a lot of the younger athletes are getting their opportunities to be visible between the ages of 8, 10, and 14. And then really when we start looking at the integration in the HP is when those ages of 14 and 15, and that's at junior rugby. A lot of the athletes are coming from high school and club and then really integrating into the interbranch competitions. I even know that some of the interbranches started working with 15-year-olds this year just to give them an opportunity because there was a demand for it. So ultimately, you can see the performance development chart on the side. Those are the targeted events that these athletes are striving for and the different levels that we're looking for athletes and coaches to be a part of, right? And stage 3 to stage 4, these young adults are striving to be a part of a Canada Summer Games, Ontario Summer Games, playing the OUA or the OCAA, and then obviously be a part of the Ontario Blues programming. The ultimate goal is to get these athletes from blue to red, and we've had so much success over the last 4 to 6 years with athletes representing us at the Olympics and World Cups. And we're starting to see the benefit of all the hard work that the clubs and the inner branches have done. And we've had a lot of representation representing from Ontario, but ultimately the goal for us is what can we do better to get our coaches represented in that also. So, what are the athlete objectives? From our standpoint, there's five key pillars here, and obviously they're all foundational. I'll go into a little bit in depth on them, but as you can see, we're building talent pipelines. We're trying to provide premium training. We've seen the enhancement of the competition and the standards with the inner branches in the provincial league. We've had a few of the university and colleges coaches come up to me this fall and praise a lot of credit to what the young players that are coming, female and male, that are coming into their universities, as they've said that the level of those athletes have improved dramatically over the last 3, 4 years. And as I said, that's credit to the work that we've been doing at the clubs and obviously at the inner branches. And really, we just want to continue to build momentum of the successes of what's happening in rugby in Canada right now. Obviously, having the women perform so well at the World Cup and the Olympics, the men qualifying for the World Cup. This is a new generation of young athletes that have ideal vision of putting on a red jersey and blue jerseys and aspire to play for Canada one day. And ultimately, our goal is to continue to push for 50 to 60% of those athlete pools on those teams to be coming from Ontario. And then we say, look, we can't do this without great coaches. And I think this is some of the mandates that we'll be looking at and sitting down with John Hyland and coach development committees. We'll be looking at to enhancing, and this is one of our biggest work on, is to providing better coach development for our high performance coaches. Ultimately, if we do have better high performance coaches, it reflects on the performance of the athletes. As our strategic plan moves forward, a big part of this development piece is integrating our learnings from my learnings or from Rugby Canada's, creating high performance clinics and workshops. Obviously, currently working as a mentor myself, but continue to grow mentorship programs for our coaches. And then obviously starting to get some of the athletes involved in coaching. Ultimately, if we can get more coaches certified and get better education for them, we'll have more success with our athlete pool in the next 2 to 3 years. And then also the match officials. I was very fortunate enough to go to the Interbranch Sevens last month, and credit to those referees that were out there. There was a fresh group of young developing referees that have a clear pathway. Many of them want to referee at the next level. Many of them want to represent Ontario at national competitions, and that's an opportunity for us as we improve high performance competitions in Ontario. The goal is to make sure that we continue to integrate these referees. So this is probably the best opportunity for them to focus on their development in these environments. So I think that that's obviously a priority that John Hyland's working on. But as an HP lead in Ontario, we would continue to support these referees with their continued growth. And as I said, not to go into too much weeds, but we did talk about, the five pillars, building a talented pipeline. We're starting to see a surplus of talent starting to develop in Ontario, especially between the 19, 20, and 21 age. And that's because of all the work that's been done over the last 3 years. We've had some great successes, right? We've had seen our U20 men and two U20 women Canada teams from a Canada perspective perform at above standard. And even in Ontario, our U19 teams, as I mentioned prior, had great successes at the CRC and also at the Canada Summer Games. And ultimately for us, the challenge is how do we continue to grow that depth, but start identifying different types of athletes. And that's the key for us, is that we need to maintain or identify there's some specific needs in Canada or in Ontario that we need to become more robust in finding different types of athletes, different sizes, because there is a demand for athletes that are bigger, taller, stronger. And I said there's 4 S's that I've always looked at when I look at talent identification, and size is probably number one, speed is second, skill is the third one, and smarts is the fourth one. If we can find athletes from other sports that possess all four of those, then we can start integrating those athletes into rugby because we know the competitions out there. We know that volleyball, soccer, hockey, football, and basketball are all NCAA sports. And it's a competitive marketplace out there for young athletes. So that all really starts at the club level. And if the clubs have a better understanding of what the athlete pool should look like, I think we'll have great successes with athletes integrating at the club level. And as you said, what we're trying to do is we're trying to provide a better level of training, and really that's always a work on. If I were to grade what our training environments are at a green, red, and yellow, I would say we're at a yellow, to be honest. Maybe compared to other provinces, we might feel like we're a green, but the reality is that we work in a volunteer environment with limited funds and resources. But as I can say, I think it's important that we as leaders in high performance is we need to provide a vision and resources so that these athletes have a better understanding of where to go to, and that really starts with the simplicity of making sure that athletes know that there's S&C support out there, right? And who are the best S&C coaches for sevens and 15s, and then obviously integrating our athletes in our regional development academies. We're very fortunate to have 3 regional development academies in Ontario, and East, West, and Essential. And then we have a foundation of the inner branches feeding into that. And obviously, we have key partners with OPSI and the Canadian Sports Institute that provide resources for mental performance, recovery, and nutrition. So those collaborations strengthen the training environments that we're trying to provide. And the competition structure. So we looked at the competition structure about 3 years ago, and we thought, what could we do to improve it? And ultimately for us, it was trying to find competition structures that would allow players to play best on best. And we've seen that happen. I think this is year 4 of the inner branches, where we've have inner branches at 14, sorry, at U17 and U19, at sevens and 15s, and now leading a natural progression into senior rugby. And ultimately, what that does is it allows our players, coaches, and referees to be in an environment where they can really celebrate some of their successes that they've had at the club level, right? So, as you said, some of those players do well at club, and some maybe don't get the chance to play in a championship at a club. But ultimately, when they do get to their inner branch competitions, we've seen a huge representation from clubs across the province, and each region is well represented. And so from that standpoint, obviously, we want to continue to grow that. And we know that competition is challenged in Canada for senior men and senior women. Ultimately, that's why we want to bring the inner branch back. And we are for the men, with the MOR not being able to support Canadian men athletes, and we have to do a better job and provide not only regional competitions, but we need to start representing Ontario abroad from a senior perspective, and we will do that moving forward. We talked about this promoting growth in Ontario and rugby. Obviously, we're trying to develop role models, and we've talked about a few of them. We have some great role models in Ontario, male and female, and really from that standpoint, we need to continue to grow those. And from a club perspective, is really engaging the alumni and other members of their community to really get out and continue to grow the game of rugby. Obviously, any partnerships and events out there that we could do our best to support rugby in Ontario is essential, especially this coming year. We were hosting CRC's Canada Rugby Championships in Guelph, and we're building out many competition and festival environment to be supported out there with the Guelph community. And as we said, like ultimately, it's just continue to create a clear pathway of participation. How exciting was it for me to go out to Hamilton this year and watch the age grade programming play? I was so impressed with the level of play from female and male out there. It was phenomenal, and the numbers were high. And I was excited to see the quality of the athlete pool too, not only the numbers. So I think what's happening after the successes of what we've seen at Olympics and World Cups and men qualifying for the World Cup, there's an inspired generation out there, and I think from a foundational set piece, the clubs are the pathway for these young athletes. And then obviously we talked about this supporting aspirations for national players. Not to go to too in depth, but ultimately the goal for us is we have to identify these athletes, provide them an environment to prepare and compete. But ultimately, we need to get these athletes in front of our U18, U20, and senior men's sevens and 15s coaches. And that's the ultimate goal for us is to continue to push forward, to have that exposure. Our alignment is important for us because all our OBDA and U18 competition structures within the interbranch or our academies are always aligned with Rugby Canada U18 coaches. So we know that every session that we have, we coordinate and provide opportunities for those athletes to be seen and also to be coached by those coaches. We're very fortunate this year to have the U20 Canada men and women coaches coming to Ontario. Obviously, the women will be in December and then in February with the men's U20 coaches. And obviously, we will continue to push forward to have Steve Mahan and Kevin Way to continue to show their presence here in Ontario. I'm very fortunate to have Stephen come in this fall and had a great opportunity to run a development series for our coaches here. And I'm working with Kevin Way, hopefully not this winter, but this spring to have him out involved in some of our upcoming OBDA session. So really exciting about that. All right, just have a little drink of water here. So what is OBDA? Ontario Blues Development Academy is the foundation piece for where we start our development from our HP. It's a dual elite pathway. So we look at sevens and 15s programming. And why we do that is we want to make sure that we can have an athlete pool similar to what the requests and the alignment of the one squad for Rugby Canada. And I think that that's important for our athletes to have aspirations to play both sevens and 15s. And as you said, it gives us an opportunity not only to have a structured approach to that, but it allows the athletes to develop those both part of those games. And then ultimately there's shared contributions from learning from both sides. From a technical, tactical aspect of it, we've seen some of the great performances from our women and men's teams over the last couple of years of that. And I think that's a continued focus for us. As you see, like many of our players are involved in this junior blows programming. We just keep it simple. Obviously, we have a talent identification phase, a selection through competition phase, a pre-competition prep, which is our academy structure, and then a competition. And for our athletes, they'll be attending the Vancouver Sevens. We're sending 4 teams per gender, and ultimately, it's a great opportunity for these athletes to play best on best against other provinces, and then obviously be visible to the national coaches, and then be mentored, and obviously attend the Vancouver Sevens. So that'll be a great experience for them. Similar to the sevens, the 15s will start this winter. Similar profiling, talent identification, selection process that's just been finalized through our combines and player involvement in the inner branches. And then we'll have pre-competition prep where our 3 regional centers will work individually. And then we've created a competition structure with the showcase games in the spring where national coaches, university coaches, and college coaches will all be there for the athletes to be observed and obviously make connections for them for their future journey if it's off to a university or college or possibly be selected to a U18 camp. From there, we have other opportunities this summer. From a sevens perspective, every couple of years we have the Ontario Summer Games. This is a U17, U18 focused targeted group. Each interbranch has 2 teams, and obviously it's a competition that we've seen so many of our athletes that have played for Ontario and Canada come through. And it's a great competition. It'll be in Waterloo, and each interbranch now, because we run sevens in the fall, has a strong foundation of a player pool to develop and obviously select from for this upcoming summer. And then our U19 program, really, that's the first time our athletes get an opportunity to represent Ontario at the 15s level. And we had some great success here last year, and a lot of credit goes to the coaches that we've had, and all the coaching staff will be returning. Similar to what we've done in the past, there's player identification through our Ontario Blues Development Academy for those 18-year-olds, but the U19s will play in an interbranch series with 3 games in the spring, and then a fourth one will be a player selection um, game match, and then ultimately the players will work with their coaching staff to prepare for 2026 CRC that'll be hosted in Guelph on July 19th to July 27th. And then just really quickly, we know we've touched on this previously and we've had discussions about this, but the senior women programming will continue with Ontario East and Ontario West playing against Quebec in a Rugby Canada supported series. The big one that's exciting about this is the beginning of a new Olympic cycle. Kevin Way has ensured that the players that compete in these competitions will be selected for the Pac 4 in May. Um, the big change is these athletes will be preparing in December and January and playing their fixtures January, February, and March, and then off to the Pac 4 in April, coming back in the end of April to play in final fixtures. And then the last piece is the piece that we're finalizing this week, and that is to bring back the senior men's programming. And ultimately, for us, we would look at having interbranch competitions for these men, and it'll be an open age category where the 4 regions would compete against each other. Ultimately, us identifying a top 50, and then from there selecting a group of 25 or 26 players that would travel to BC and compete at games against uh, the BC Bears and some Canada programming out in Victoria. So that's it for me. Um, I know that's a lot of information and a lot of key talking points, but I'll open it up to the floor. Obviously, there'll be some questions from people out there and fire away.
Open floor. Now's your chance.
Josh, you can ask me a question. What's on your mind? Anything from that?
Well, I would say what we were talking about going into this, right, was the club role and how does the club development kind of impact that. So if you're speaking to kind of club presidents or club leaders
Yeah.
on this call, what would you tell them about how their development impacts the development of players?
Yeah, I mean, as I said before, I think like from personal experience and obviously being a part of clubs in Ontario over the past 15, 20 years, it's the foundation. And I said like between the ages, I mean, it's even starting younger now. So I mean, when these athletes are coming to your club, it's really important that when they get there, they feel like they have an identity and they belong and they're having fun and they're enjoying themselves. And as I notice when I go to clubs and I've seen some really great clubs there, those kids are always full of joy, especially at those 7s and 15 age grade tournaments. It's uh, they're all together. It's the food after. It's them taking pictures, all that secondary stuff. I don't even mention rugby, but the reality is, I think from that standpoint, from my personal experience, anytime that I've been in a club that made me feel like I was special or belonged was very important because I can say as a parent and as a leader in sports, I've seen what other sports have done and haven't done a good job of, and why people leave those sports. And it really does come down to kids just not enjoying it. And, coaches are being too hard on athletes, focusing on winning, focusing on limiting playing time. And I think what we've done in rugby is allowed multiple individuals to really embrace a sport where everyone belongs, right? And I think it doesn't have to be an HP focus where
Mhm.
we're looking for the best of breed. We're just looking for athletes to get really involved in the sport, right?
Yeah.
I know there's a question below or comment from Colin.
Yeah, Colin just asked what financial assistance is available for players. Have we tried a
Yeah,
training session tournament? There's a cost associated, right? So
sure. I mean, that's a great question. And like as I said in the past, financial assistance is a challenge for all parents. And I think hopefully I can announce this, but or make wind of it. But I know that at the last AGM, or the last board meeting, Rugby Ontario has taken note of this, and from from my understanding, there'll be a fund created for athletes moving forward to support these athletes that are financially challenged. So, Colin, you can go back to Miles and get confirmation of that, but
Spoiler
I know
alert.
that yes, I know that there has been something put forward and has been approved. So hopefully that can be communicated at a later date. Maybe I shouldn't have communicated that, but that's okay. It'll eventually get out there. So yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Nothing confirmed details yet, but definitely that's something
no,
that,
yeah, definitely it's on the agenda, right?
yeah. Rob, go for it.
Yeah, Sandra, I know we tend to talk positive about, all the growth and all the achievements
Yeah,
we've done, and certainly that's real. I'm kind of looking for your thoughts on, I'm especially speaking from the U17 interbranch level, and how good are we
yeah,
and how good are those programs, and are they really good enough to
yeah.
put Canada back on the map in terms of, top 12 achievements, et cetera? Like, what do we need to do? What's achievable steps to move those programs forward in your mind?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's a great question. And as I said, like when I said we're at a yellow, I'm being pretty fair at that. We played BC this summer, and you were involved and you've seen it. Obviously, I would say we are very t talent rich. It's the development piece that needs to improve. And I think like we have a better understanding that if the athletes have better competition structure and they spend more time in the off season focusing on physical development, we'll start closing the gap. I guess what ultimately have been very fortunate to see athlete pools from across the world. Um, we're not far off, but as I said, like our culture needs to change where people need to like focus on that physical development piece because when we watch our U20 programming and have had discussions with our U20 Canada men's coach, is our athletes weren't prepared at certain standards compared to the others. And so I would say that's the first thing I talked about in our development piece is the strength and conditioning, but it's also the smarts. Like we have to have athletes that are smarter, right? And game understanding. Our athlete pool has to become culturally acceptable to watch rugby, not just highlight clips. You need to sit down and watch games. You need to sit down with someone in the club who's a bit older and sit down and talk with them about what they see. Because ultimately, our athletes are very great in a structured environment, but we're trying to teach these athletes to play in an unstructured environment, to play with chaos, and has become very good at transition rugby. And I think that that's some of the things that we're trying to integrate at Rugby Ontario. But that has to become an identity for us in rugby, because right now we don't have it an identity per se. Whereas you watch our women, they have an identity. They're leaders. They play a style of rugby that is admired from around the world. And so I think with under Steve Meehan's new leadership, there's going to be some parallels between the games that Kevin Rouet has coached and what he's going to coach. And that'll trickle down to us. So I think that uncomfortableness of coaches seeing that is our responsibility now to go out to the clubs and the inner branches to start teaching them that way of playing rugby. Because I think that that'll be the transformational piece from a 4 to 8 year stand is adapting that winning style of play. Hopefully that head nod is like, yeah, we're on the same page.
No,
Um,
all good input. Yep.
Yeah. And that's as transparent as I could be, right?
yeah.
More
Uh,
questions. I'm just
Colin has
looking.
a follow-up here, and this I think really speaks to the alignment topic and alignment question. What direction does Rugby Ontario have over the regional calendars or the branch calendars? And citing the case of athletes in Eastern Ontario having to choose
Uh,
between an OBDA showcase or a possible sevens tour to Portugal.
yeah. Um, what direction? I think from our standpoint, our programming is from an OBDA perspective, our athletes are made aware of the opportunities. If an athlete wants to decide and choose multiple opportunities, that's within the athlete. Um, it's their choice, right? Ultimately, that's their choice. And from our standpoint, we can only provide guidance and resources for those athletes if they want to, multiple athletes travel and represent their inner branches, their provinces, and their clubs. So from that standpoint, I think it's something that the athlete has. when it comes to their personal choices.
Mhm. So RO calendar set by you, but branches are still setting their own calendar, or is there?
Yeah, I think from our standpoint, we have an overlying blueprint of our calendar and the days, but the
Mhm.
inner branches run their own individual programming throughout the year. So it's like clubs and inner branches run their own programming. Ultimately, we try to stay aligned as much as possible with them.
So,
Colin,
so
and did
just
you want
on
to
that
follow
one,
up?
yeah, I've got my hands up. So just on that one, I think we need to make sure the athletes don't. Although we say it's up to the individual athlete,
Yeah,
there's definitely a fear of missing out because if an athlete chooses to go, and I'll use this as a case, but it's just an example. But if an
yeah,
athlete chooses to go to Portugal, are they then going to be disadvantaged by not going to the OBDA showcase,
no.
or vice versa? So
Yeah, I
it's a
don't.
question really to
Yeah,
you
I
and
mean,
to the
that's a
region.
great question. But from my standpoint, at that early age, I don't think it's a disadvantage. I think that rugby opportunities come in different sizes. So if an athlete wants to take on that opportunity, from my perspective, I think we have a lot of opportunities to see our athletes. We see them at the inner branch, we see them at clubs, we see them at the OBDA. Ultimately, travel and experiences and playing abroad are as important as sometimes playing in an inner branch competition. So yeah, I don't think athletes will ever miss out on opportunities to represent Ontario or Canada. I think it's just based on situational, right? If some opportunities come up at different times, we have athletes and from all over the province taking opportunities to maybe go to Pacific Pride and playing for the Pride or going overseas to play rugby in an academy. We've had multiple athletes, even from Eastern Ontario now, that are taking opportunities or going to South Africa. I think from our standpoint is we just have to be diligent on maintaining those relationships with those athletes. If they do leave Ontario, then it's our job and their job to stay connected to us. And especially if their aspiration is to play for Ontario in Canada, that we continue to maintain those strong relationships and connection with those athlete pool. So yeah, I think it's exciting that athletes are traveling around the world and playing rugby abroad.
I agree. No, thanks for that clarification because it was a question that's been raised at
Yeah,
Barhaven because we have obviously quite a few players that might do both.
yeah,
And my final question, and leading on from that, is it because we are looking and I'm thinking about club wise now of
yeah.
tours and playing games. Is there any RO restriction, for example, on traveling to America to the States, for example, at the
Yeah.
moment? Or there's not, is there? I mean, RO aren't putting a restriction.
Yeah, I don't, I would, I'm not comfortable just like making a statement around that. I think that that would be from an NSO perspective, making any recommendations for travel. But as we said, like at the end of the day, I think everyone is pretty comfortable making their own decisions. But as from our standpoint, I think most of our travel um, is domestic at this standpoint. When we do travel as Rugby Ontario, we're traveling in Canada.
Yeah, that's right. That's really the crux of the question. So thank you for that. Thank you for the
No, I
clarity.
appreciate the questions, Colin.
Yeah. And on that, I would say too, if you're thinking about club programming or club tours and where you might tour or when, what that might look like, don't hesitate to reach out both to myself or Sandro, but also to member services and competitions in terms of sort of the sanctioning process and the timelines for that. So we're
Yeah,
happy to help.
our member services is really great at making sure that clubs, athletes are getting the right information when they're traveling abroad. So, as you said, we have a great team, and yes, don't hesitate to reach out, and we'll make sure that there's clarity around all those.
No, thank
Mhm.
you for that. And
Yeah,
I did have one last question. I do apologise. It's completely unrelated or not slightly different now. So we're talking about coaching development as well.
yeah,
So I'm a talk. So what if I've got a couple of young players in the club who want to go into coaching,
yeah,
and obviously they're following the normal pathway. How do they break into, or now what's their pathway to break in, really to break into to be seen at the sort of
yeah.
regional provincial level? So we
Yeah.
we get the young, the younger coaches having a more of a distinct pathway as opposed to the sort of the old and bold, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think from our standpoint, Um, we look at from my standpoint when I'm looking at coaches, I look at the interbranch competition as one of the foundational ones. So if you look at it, we're currently, if you looked at the sevens or the 15s, we have 30 to 40 coaches in those environments, and from that perspective, it gives us an opportunity to see the coaches coach, and then to get the feedback not only from the coaches but from the players and the families that are involved in that. Ultimately, I would say anyone who's aspiring to be a coach, the pathway starts with club, interbranch, provincial, but also get involved in university and college coaching, because there's a lot of opportunities there. And I know that they're willing and they're excited about having coaches join them in those ranks. And that's the conversations what I have with many of the coaches that are either currently playing or just finished their career of rugby and aspire to be coaches. The journey's long. I mean, I can tell you from my personal experience as being a Canadian coach that went through the ranks, and I can see my personal journey. I'll be as transparent as possible. I started at a high school. I worked at a club, and then I worked at a university for 6, 7 years. And then I did provincial rugby for 4 or 5 years. And then I got my first opportunity to coach Canada. So 10 years into the journey was my window of opportunity. And I would say that, Colin, the best thing for these young coaches is not to rush the process, is to enjoy coaching at the foundation, the levels where they can actually develop those players. Because as you get into the higher ranks, it's more about player management, game management. And so from these coaches that aspire, get your feet stuck into club rugby, and especially eighth grade, because that's where they're needed and that's where they're most influential. But hopefully that answers your question.
No, it doesn't. And thank you for that. And sorry for taking your time.
No, that's no problem.
That's why we're here, right?
Yeah, great questions.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else have anything? Sandra, while they're thinking, we've got a few
Yeah.
minutes left. I might ask you just to speak around coming back to one of Colin's points earlier of sort of the opportunities for late entry, and what do different pathways look like. So we've kind of talked about sort of
Like
standard
late entries for
pathways
players or
for
coaches.
players. Yeah, we could touch on
Yeah,
coach.
I think late entry, like Kevin Wade talked about, like late entry into provincial programming and national programming,
Mhm.
like as a players. I think that that's in part of the challenge in Canada is that it's not a challenge. We've seen it where athletes come in from a different sport, right? Or, our our specialized positions in 15s sometimes take longer to develop, right? So I always say that from an entry point, if you're not involved at a university or college, then club is your entry point. And like for a woman right now, and Kevin even said it on his call. He doesn't care if you're 21 or 31. But you need to be at the standard that they're looking for, right? It's one of those things that you have to have. When I talked about the four S's, Joss, you got to have three of those four S's. You got to have the size, the speed, the skill, and the smarts. If you only have one, I'll tell you right now that you're probably not going to be an HP athlete. But if you have three of those four, then that's a person that they're going to be looking for, male or female. Right? And I think that that's a fair assessment with even our younger athletes, that there is a standard, there's not even a minimum. There's a standard that you need to be at you physically to contribute at the provincial or international level.
Yeah. Yeah. So for those players who are worried about, missing their window or their opportunity,
Yeah.
just to know that, yeah, there are multiple ways to develop that talent and multiple entry
Yeah.
points along the pathway.
And we have athletes from other sports that have become Olympians. Like we have had two basketball players leave rugby at 18, go play NCAA basketball, and then come back and rejoin us, right? And we have Sophie DeGood, who's a prime example, played multiple sports, and there's a few of the senior men previously played football and youth sport and became rugby players. So from a recruitment standpoint, I would empower all the clubs out there to start looking for those unicorns from
Mhm.
other sports, especially height, right? I think there's a deficit in this country, especially for the men's game, is we don't have a lot of height in our forward packs. So yeah, I think Colin has one more question.
So
It's okay.
just building on that one. So obviously we understand there's a potential gap between the post university stroke no older 20s age group.
Yeah,
So I think everybody is well seen, well covered, well trained up until sort of university or college level. How we break it? How are we going to manage that gap between post university and sort of 25,
yeah,
26, 27 age group?
yeah. I think as I discussed earlier, I think um, we know that there's a gap, and I think from the women's perspective, we've created the two regional teams, and from the men's perspective, this has been part of our agenda for the last 3 years is to bring back the inner branches. So from discussions with Steve Meehan, he knows that there's players in Canada and especially in Ontario that could probably be selected over the current Ontario Canada roster. And so we've made a commitment to get our best 100, 115 plus senior men to participate in the spring inter branch. So not to go into too much of the weeds, but it is coming and there'll be a competition in place. And that hopefully will fill the gap for those athletes between the ages of 20 to 30, whatever. So yeah, be patient. That's coming. Announcement is coming soon.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem. Appreciate it.
All right, one more question
That
in there.
Kelly.
Yeah, what do you tell a player who doesn't have the size, height, but has skill, smarts, and speed, or maybe doesn't have height but is developing the other standards? Would they just
Yeah,
be overlooked at tryouts because of height?
no, never. I'm a big fan of speed. So, as I said before, if you have three out of the four, you're in a good spot. And yeah, I mean, speed of play, speed of ball, speed of decision ultimately is the foundation of our women's programming, sevens and 15s. So, I think even for men's sevens and 15s, but speed is the magic word, right? And it's one of the things that we can't coach per se. Joss, I had opportunity to coach you. I would say your superpower was probably speed. So I think for many people that have that superpower, it can get you a long way. Especially if, as I said, especially if you have smarts, right? If you're super fast and you can play fast and make decisions
Yeah.
um, in those environments, you'll have success.
Yeah.
And that's the best thing about rugby. You could be 5'5" or 6'6", right?
Okay, follow up to that.
Yeah.
Are there resources to help kids develop speed, not just Instagram posts? How can coaches help them succeed with speed?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question. I think like part of the opportunities that I've said is that there are resources out there. But as a parent myself and as a former track athlete, the best thing I can say is go join a track club. Don't mess around,
Yeah.
right? Don't mess around with Instagram and online. Go join a track club and you'll see a massive improvement in your speed, probably 30% increase in the first year of joining a track club. So those are the things of when you say like what's the best thing to do in the off season, there's a lot of great things to do. But I think from my personal experience as a parent and as a player, the speed training definitely has um, massive benefits to our athletes.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you're looking for something more local, maybe that's inviting a track coach or someone with
Yeah.
speed training to come out and do a session or a series of sessions for your club kids, right? A little
Yeah.
sport
Put it
overlap.
in your Yeah, put it in your YTP, like in your yearly training plan.
Yeah.
I know lots of sports do a soccer or whatever. They have an S&C specialist, and they're not expensive. They just charge them for a session. They come out twice a month, and they build out a speed program and an agility and quickness program. So yeah, that's a great question.
While you're at it, teach their track kids rugby, you know?
Exactly, that's a great crossover.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, 10 seconds here if anyone's got anything else. Otherwise, I will wrap us up. But I think we're good. Okay. So
Sorry,
yeah,
Josh, did you say I missed the first 5 minutes, so I apologize. Did you say the slides will be available?
I'm about to say that. Yeah. I
I'd
didn't
be
mention at the
interested.
start. I
Thank you.
think I mentioned it in some of the emails that went out. But yes,
Yeah.
all these sessions are recorded. The recording and the slides will be available in the virtual portal. So exactly where you
Yeah.
accessed it here, just instead of it being live, it'll be there for you to watch the recording or access the slides after the fact. So we'll get that up hopefully tomorrow, but if not next week.
Yeah, and the good news from an HP perspective, we'll be communicating our strategic plan and a new communication plan because it has become a priority. I'll take onus of that. We definitely need to do a better job of communicating. So a lot of this information will be uploaded to the website in the next month and from all age grade programming. So
Yeah,
if you don't get it on the slides, it'll be on our website in the near future.
yeah, yeah. Great point, Sandro.
Yeah,
Um, and then all the recordings eventually will move to YouTube as well. So everything will be available on YouTube eventually.
yeah.
Yeah, if you weren't already planning to attend on Saturday, or you've got friends who aren't registered, virtual registration is still open for the Club Dev conference full day starting at 9 a.m. on Saturday morning. So please join us again then. We've got some great sessions happening. Those again will be available through the portal afterwards. So if you miss part of it or you can only listen in for part, you can always revisit them afterwards. Yeah, otherwise, thanks, Sandro, for taking the time, and thank all of you for joining and for the great questions. And have a great night. We look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thanks, everyone.